On Sunday evening, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced at the cusp of Ramadan that he had decided to deny water, food, and medical supplies to the people of Gaza. Apparently, shortly thereafter, Steve Witkoff, President Trump's emissary, called him and told him to dial it back, whereupon today, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that not only is he going to deny food, water, and medical supplies, he's going to turn off electricity. I guess he thinks he can get away with this.
I think that's probably the case. I mean, his history with the United States is quite straightforward. He always gets his way. And in fact, whenever he's in political trouble in Israel, he flies to the United States and he meets either with the president or talks before Congress or does both. And he props up his standing in Israel and he lives to fight another day. So in terms of Netanyahu's dealings with the United States, he is in a win-win situation.
And is the answer to my question the lobby? Why is Donald Trump, who is a man of peace and willing to frustrate the entire foreign policy establishment on Russia and Ukraine, simply going along, even doing more than Joe Biden, about which more in a moment, on Israel and Gaza?
It's the lobby. I mean, the idea that the United States has a special relationship with Israel that has no parallel in recorded history tells you something that tells you that something extraordinary is going on here. This is an unbelievable relationship. Israel is a country that is effectively a strategic albatross around our neck, number one. And number two, it is in the process of committing genocide in Gaza, yet we support it unconditionally. The United States is a liberal democracy. For a liberal democracy to be supporting a state that behaves like this is truly remarkable. And again, we're not just supporting Israel, we give Israel unconditional support. And the question you want to ask yourself is, why is this the case? And the answer is clear. It's the Israel lobby. They basically have so much power in the United States that they get their way almost every time.
So yesterday, Secretary of State Rubio, in my opinion, committed perjury when he certified under oath to the Congress that Israel was in a state of emergency and required the immediate delivery of $4 billion worth of military gear, so immediate that there wasn't time to bring it to the Congress for the ordinary appropriations. There's a statute that allows, as you know, that allows the Secretary of State to do that. When Tony Blinken did that, I accused him of perjury, and I accuse false swearing under oath. I accuse the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, of the same thing. What emergency? Is it a political emergency? What conceivable emergency is there that they don't have time to go to the Congress, which they know will give them whatever they ask for?
I mean, there is no emergency, at least emergency involving Israel. But this kind of thing just happens all the time. And I'd put it in a slightly different way. I think the dishonesty in our mainstream discourse about Israel is just off the charts. It's really hard to believe. The discourse that we engage in newspapers like the New York Times and especially the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, and the discourse that our politicians are involved in about Israel is almost laughable when you actually look at the facts and then compare the facts to what's being said. But this has been true for a long time, and there's no reason to think it's going to change.
So not only can Israel commit genocide and receive financial aid from the United States in violation of two federal statutes, not only can Israel have an atomic weapon without authority of the United Nations in violation of a treaty as well as a federal statute, Israel can benefit from secretaries of state lying about the immediacy of its need for all this gear and military equipment. All right, I get it. Is there an organized resistance to Israel in the Middle East?
No. I mean, there's no question that there are lots of countries in the Middle East that are deeply dissatisfied with what Israel is doing. But the Arab states have never organized in any meaningful way to stand up to Israel. And in a number of cases, they've thrown the Palestinians under the bus. To the extent that there is resistance, it involves Iran, it involves Hezbollah, and now it involves the Houthis. That is the real resistance here. And it's had some effect, but not much effect in terms of stopping the genocide.
What about Turkey and Egypt? Colonel McGovern seems to feel that both are under tremendous leadership of both are under tremendous pressure from their own people to do something militarily, particularly President/General, I don't know if he's still a general or not, al-Sisi in Egypt. And Colonel McGovern, who's a former tank commander, says the Egyptians are amassing huge numbers of tanks in the Sinai. Does that tell you anything?
Look, I think there's no question that in countries like Egypt and Jordan, more so than Turkey, but even in Turkey, there is tremendous pressure from down below on the leadership in those countries to do something about the genocide in Gaza. But the question you have to ask yourself is, do those countries have the military wherewithal to challenge Israel? And I think if you're talking about an armored battle involving Israeli tanks and aircraft up against Egyptian tanks and aircraft, that the Israelis would win easily, as they did in 1956, 1967, and 1973. And therefore, I find it hard to believe that the Egyptians would pick a fight with the Israelis. I don't think the Jordanians would under any circumstances. And I find it hard to believe that the Turks would either. The fact is that the Israelis pretty much have a free hand. And you want to remember that backing them up at every turn is the United States of America. So if they pick a fight with any one of those countries or any combination of those countries and they get into trouble, the United States will come racing to the rescue.
Do you think maybe the kerfuffle in the Oval Office on Friday between the president and his vice president and President Zelensky might have sent a message to Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm sure that Netanyahu is fully confident that he can manipulate the Trump administration in all sorts of ways and prevail over them. There may be some cases where there are domestic political forces inside of Israel that combine with some pressure from the United States to get Israel to do what it doesn't want to do. I think this explains why Israel agreed to the ceasefire with the Palestinians that took place on January 19th of this year. You want to remember that Steve Witkoff went over there and told Netanyahu that President Trump wanted a ceasefire by the time he was inaugurated, which of course was on January 20th. But the only reason Witkoff was successful was because the IDF, the Israeli military, desperately wanted a ceasefire, as did some other forces in Israel, and they were putting pressure on Netanyahu. So there you had the combination of pressure from President-elect Trump at the time and from down below in Israeli society to cause Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire. But
why does the donor class still have a hold on Donald Trump? He can't run for re-election. He doesn't need them anymore.
Well, the fact is that he has a broad agenda, and he has basically 4 years left as president. He has to worry about midterm elections, and he doesn't want to challenge the lobby this early in his presidency, because it will just lead to one headache after another. The lobby is incredibly powerful. If they put their gun sights on Trump, it will cause him enormous trouble moving forward. And he has enough, other problems without having to pick a fight with the lobby. So he'll just go along with Israel.